Welcome to our world and your world of green matters. This week, an alternative energy source, body heat, and stemming the tide of global warming. But first, a traditional organic fabric from an unusual source. In the Philippines, pineapple is not just a fruit. For centuries, the fine fibres of its leaves have been used for making cloth for traditional garments. Women of Aklan province carry on the practice today. It takes them almost a month to create 1 metre of the fabric. For most women in the town of Kalibo, sitting at a loom is a rite of passage.
It was really my ambition to become a weaver. I enjoyed it a lot. In the afternoon, when my mother stepped off the loom, I would try it out. And when the threads broke, I put them back together. I was very interested.
Susuma eventually employed some fellow housewives as weavers and created a business making dinner sets for American clients. But when commercial fabrics dominated the market, only a handful of weavers survived, and Aklan province's weaving industry declined. With such a labour-intensive process, pineapple cloth is not cheap, selling at around $61 US a metre. Locally, a few designers specialise in haute couture, made of pineapple fabric. And increasingly, the exotic paper-thin cloth is becoming sought after by high-profile designers from Japan, the United States and France. Exports of the cloth are so far fairly small, but locals hope that this might change as a result of new trends globally.
If you compete with synthetics, you would really say that it cannot be done. I mean, it won't flourish. But then the trend now is on organic. No chemical is being used. Even the dyes are safe. Now, it should be globally safe for everyone.
The Philippines' pineapple cloth industry preserves local traditions and indigenous skills and is an important source of income for rural communities. The very fine fibres that make up pineapple cloth are thinner than hair strands, and the woven fabric is both exotic and beautiful. The whole process from start to finish is clean and sustainable, fully utilising nature's bounty and preserving the culture of a people. Nature gives and nature takes. Near the city of Surabaya on Indonesia's island of Java, since 2006, a mud volcano has continuously spewed mud and toxic fumes in an ongoing environmental and humanitarian catastrophe. Also on Java, in the Grobogan region, another mud volcano, by contrast, delivers a welcome bounty to local people. From deep below the Earth's surface, geothermal forces push muddy fluids and vapour up out of the ground. But unlike the disastrous Lucy mud volcano, these emissions are neither hot nor toxic. For centuries, Bladukuwu has continued its pattern of almost constant eruptions. The waters surrounding the volcano are mineral-rich, laden with a sweet salt. Local villagers harvest the salt. Water from the 4.5-hectare pool that surrounds the volcano is channeled into smaller collection ponds. The water is poured over grass beds which filter it as it passes through. It's then ladled onto bamboo sections and left to dry out in the sun. Once evaporated, the residue is pure salt.
This salt is different from ordinary salt because it's made in bamboo and its taste is a little bit sweet. Ordinary salt is made from seawater. Ordinary salt is cheaper, at 350 rupiah for 1 kilogram. But this salt is 2,000 rupiah for 1 kilogram.
The salt is a handy supplement to local incomes. In the right conditions, this couple can make up to 40 kilograms of salt a week.
We make salt only as a side job and not as our main job. We are farmers. We make salt only during the dry season because we need the sun to evaporate the water.
Despite a lack of attention from local authorities, the mud volcano has become a tourist attraction. Some visitors get to see the erratic geyser eruptions from as close as 10 metres. It had taken 5 years and an international tussle, but the Taiping Four were about to go home at last. At South Africa's Pretoria Zoo, where they had been pulling big crowds, preparations were underway to send 1 male and 3 female Western lowland gorillas back to their native Cameroon. This was the closing chapter to a drawn-out tale of traffickers, forgery, red tape, greed and cruelty. As babies, the gorillas' mothers were murdered by poachers, probably for bushmeat. The 4, still clinging to their dead mothers, were pulled from their bodies and taken away. They survived a brutal and all too common massacre, where typically 4 out of 5 babies die as a result of stress.
These animals have been sort of in some other form of captivity for the last 4 years. That's from the time that they were caught, where we presume that they were caught in Cameroon, then moved to Nigeria, and then from Nigeria to Malaysia, after which the CITES authorities realized that they were illegally imported through fraudulent documentation from Nigeria, and then came down to the zoo. So all in all, it's probably been about a 4-year process.
Malaysia's Taiping Zoo had bought the gorillas from Nigeria's Ibadan Zoo, with papers saying they were bred there. This zoo had in fact never bred gorillas and housed only 1 aged female gorilla. When conservationists alerted Taiping Zoo and the worldwide media to the true status of the gorilla babies, pressure mounted to return them to their country of origin, as specified in the CITES International Treaty. But despite Cameroon's repeated requests for their return, they were instead sent to Pretoria in 2004, pending DNA testing to establish their country of origin. Even with this done, it was almost the end of 2007 before the big day finally dawned. And what a big day it was for all concerned. The process was to take them to the Limbe Wildlife Sanctuary in southwest Cameroon. The whole journey would take almost 24 hours, with travel by road and air. The unfamiliar surroundings, movement and sounds could be highly stressful for the animals and potentially dangerous for all involved. By now, around 6 years old, the 4 babies had of course grown up, each weighing about 100 kilos. 4 big agitated gorillas would hardly be ideal airline passengers. They all had to be anaesthetised, one by one. Veterinarians then performed a routine health check as well as blood tests in compliance with South African and Cameroonian requirements. Medical procedures complete, it was now time to load the gorillas into their travel crates.
The keys must be with Neil. Okay, if we just take him down, it'll be fine.
Although by now the anaesthetic was beginning to wear off, the animals were still under sedation, just enough to keep them conscious but calm for a safe journey. From Pretoria, the gorillas were transported by road to Johannesburg to catch their flight to Nairobi. Throughout the various stages of the entire journey, the gorillas were kept in individual crates, but together so they could see each other. Courtesy of Kenya Airways, the gorillas flew from Johannesburg to Nairobi and then on to Cameroon. Finally, Limbe, about 80 kilometres from Douala International Airport. The town itself is situated at the foot of Mount Cameroon, which is home to many rare and endangered primates. Cameroon is one of the few countries where western lowland gorillas still exist in the wild. Like many species, numbers are rapidly diminishing, largely due to an increase in the bushmeat trade. Logging tracks have opened up access to wildlife as well as an easy route out to markets. Contrary to belief, bushmeat is not just consumed by poor local people. Much is smuggled out and sold in large cities, including Lagos, Johannesburg, and even London, Paris, and New York, where it is a delicacy for the wealthy. Bushmeat traffickers also thrive by supplying logging workers, whose employers often dump them in remote areas without food. Even major international companies do this, knowing that in doing so, they are tacitly supporting the illegal trade. The Central African bushmeat harvest in 2006 was estimated as equivalent to 9 billion quarter-pounder hamburgers. The resulting orphaned infants, which are lucky enough to survive and escape the illegal wildlife and pet trade, find their way into the Limbe Wildlife Centre. The Taiping Four join a group of 11 gorillas already at Limbe, and after a quarantine period are expected to settle in well. After a long and arduous journey so far through life, for these 4 gorillas and other primates here, there really is sanctuary at last. Stockholm's central station is the largest in Sweden and the largest travel centre in the Nordic region. Every day, 250,000 people swarm through the beautiful 19th century building, collectively giving off a lot of body heat. An innovative project plans to use that heat to warm a nearby 13-storey office block, providing up to 15% of the heating requirement. The cost of the project will be about 200,000 Swedish crowns, about $31,000 US. It's a win-win for the station's owners, who are also building the new eco-friendly office block.
Absolutely not a gimmick. It's a financial issue for us. It's interesting because we earn some money on it, and of course it's very good for our environment. We save money and we save energy.
Although body warmth is used for heating individual buildings, it's never been transferred from one building to another.
To make this work, we use the present pipes from the late 50s. And what we do now is transfer the heating into water energy and transport the heating or the energy with the water pipes to the new building. And in the new building, we transfer it to air.
We're now in one of the energy centrals in the train station, and behind me there's one of these heat exchangers. This is where we take the heat from the ventilation system today. So we'll make this one much, much bigger, and that's how we're going to draw all the energy from this building, from the air, from the people who are walking outside. So we're going to take it into this one, and then we'll pump it away in these pipes over to the next building, 200 meters in that direction.
The concept is clever but simple, using much of the existing infrastructure and utilising old but established technology. If it proves successful, it could be a very functional and economic application. Already the unfinished building is attracting international interest, being designed to use just half the energy of similar buildings. Its owners hope it will become a role model for modern property development. Recently, at a dig in northern Greece, paleontologists were excited to find what they believed were the tusks of a very large prehistoric mastodon. The 3 million-year-old tusks are 5 meters in length. They're now on display at the small Natural History Museum in Milia village, near where they were found.
These tusks are of a scientific importance because it shows for the first time that the mastodon, which was discovered at Milia, is the biggest mastodon ever found in the world.
The longest tusks previously found were discovered nearby by the same team in 1997. Patience obviously pays. The paleontologists have been excavating for the past 17 years. They found the tusks along with the jaw and leg bones. Using these, they've created a small-scale model of a 6-ton, 25 to 30-year-old male, 3.5 metres high to the shoulder and tusk to tail almost 9 metres long.
It ate leaves and branches, and it needed to consume 300 kilograms of food and 200 litres of water every day.
The scientists hope to extract DNA from the tusks and also to gain an understanding of why the mastodon, a regular inhabitant of Europe, became extinct.
This species, which became extinct somewhere between 2 million and 2.5 million years ago, was roaming Europe during what we call the Pliocene. We don't know why this animal became extinct, and paleontologists want to find out why this animal became extinct.
The ancestor of the modern elephant, and similar to the mammoth, the mastodon appeared 4 million years ago in North America, Africa and Eurasia. The last mastodon died out in North America about 10,000 years ago. On the banks of the Humber estuary in Lincolnshire, northern England, rising tide levels have become a major concern. To reduce the risk of massive flooding, Britain's Environment Agency has undertaken one of the largest flood storage schemes in Europe, knocking a 20-metre breach into existing flood defences. This will reduce tide levels by allowing water from the estuary to run over the flats and form a massive flood storage area.
The Humber itself has a very large tidal range at this point here. On the biggest tides we have a tidal range of about 7.5 metres between low and high water. The extreme height of that tide is altering every year because of sea level rise, and what we've seen over about 80 years is about 2 millimetres a year of increase. All the predictions are, because of climate change, that will increase and it may go up to as much as 12 millimetres a year. What that does is it puts increasing pressure on our defences around the Humber, and to try and relieve that pressure we've designed schemes like this one where we're allowing water out of the main channel of the estuary and into land that was formerly protected, and that acts as a bit of a safety valve and takes the pressure off the defences elsewhere.
This scheme is part of a long-term strategy for managing flood risk on the Humber estuary. More than £80 million will be spent improving the area's flood defences in the next 5 years, including maintenance on existing infrastructure and new tidal control measures.
The Humber estuary is one of the largest estuaries in the UK. The land around it tends to be low-lying. About 90,000 hectares of land is below highest tide level, and 400,000 people live in that area and work in that area. The defences that we provide are essential for protecting those people and their property from extreme tidal events. The function of the scheme here is to reduce the height of extreme tidal events in the Humber, and it does that by allowing water out of the river during extreme events through the breach here and also over a section of the bank further along to fill the whole of the site. And when it does that, the high tide levels in the Humber are reduced by about 150 millimetres.
The Humber estuary forms a vital link in a chain of wetlands stretching from the Arctic to the West African coast. These wetlands provide essential feeding sites for thousands of birds migrating between their northerly breeding grounds and winter feeding areas. Since the sea wall was breached in 2006, a new intertidal habitat has developed, attracting more species of wildfowl and wading birds into the area.
The purpose of the site is first and foremost obviously for flood defence and to act as a flood storage area, but managed realignment sites are really important for the habitats that they can create as well. We're talking about things like mudflats and salt marsh, which over a number of years will start to develop here. But we're already attracting thousands and thousands of different birds, particularly over the autumn and the winter time, when the Humber estuary becomes a very important feeding ground for a lot of water birds. So we're talking about things like different types of duck, geese, and what we refer to as waders, so birds like lapwing and golden plover and curlew.
Britain's Environment Agency views the Humber Flood Storage Scheme as part of a long-term strategy in which many more areas will be similarly treated.
Tide levels will get higher and higher, and we need to do something about that. We can't always raise defences in all locations. In some places, like here, we've got to give land back to the estuary to allow space for the water to spread out.
With no quick fix to the challenges of global warming and environmental destruction, the hope is by working with, rather than against the forces of nature, there will be a better outcome. Join us again when we bring you more of what matters to keep our world green.